Meghan Markle has been called what this week by her terrified former member of staff?
One man said that she reduced grown men to tears.
Really?
Another one called her a dictator in heels because they were saying she marches around barking orders at people, demanding things of people and literally making people cry. The investigation also said that Prince Harry comes across as charming and nice, but one of the sources actually called him an enabler.
Meghan Markle, she's about as popular as a poo in the swimming pool.
Well, probably less, actually. But the reality is that I felt a bit sorry. You remember, it was Harry's birthday at the weekend.
Yes.
He was 40. And they had a lovely picture of him with Meghan when they got married, and I think it was in Dublin. And there's a lovely picture. But what's happened is the royal family have cropped her out of it. So that smiling picture you see in the press of Harry is just Harry with Meghan cut out. So I have a bit of time for poor old Meghan.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I'm probably the only person ever who speaks so about. I got a nice little pot. Remember she gave some jam to people?
Yeah.
Do you remember those 50 pots? She sent
those.
me one because I was the only person in the media to say something nice about her.
So just to be clear,
Yes.
and this question is not to the panel,
Yes.
it's the producer of this show. We have booked this man, and he can be bribed with a pot of jam by
that would be
Meghan
good.
Markle.
Isn't that good? Of course. It's available in all good shops. Absolutely.
No, you can't promote Meghan Markle's property. Right, Andrew, you've misunderstood this. The people that watch and listen to me hate her.
Oh,
say something negative.
I'll go negative.
Was it terrible, Jam?
I'd quite happily go negative. Well, one thing she was also called was Duchess of Difficult, which I thought was quite a good little nifty phrase. But if we actually look at the number of staff that she's gone through,
It's enormous.
It's absolutely incredible, and particularly John Kettler, who was there for less than 3 months. He's a very...
Sorry, wasn't John Kettler the weatherman?
He was.
But no, he's a very well-respected consultant, knows his stuff, so there's a reason that they've gone. And let's not forget Prince Harry's best friend, who was head of the Invictus Games, up to left sticks the moment they seem to be kind of expanding and all the rest of it, which is something they've been working on together. So for him to leave randomly like that is, again, very questionable. Whether there's any causal link between the two, we don't really know. But there's no smoke without fire. That's what I was thinking.
Well, there is. I mean, we can't, a barrister will never allow you to say there's no smoke without fire. But, Stephen, I just want to ask you this. Is there an argument to say that she's been a bit of a victim here?
We have not traditionally got on well with American divorcees. They have caused some constitutional issues and ruptures along the years. There probably are, issues on both sides. I like this because I think it's an opportunity for us to grow up. And I'm going to start looking more for opportunities for us to grow up as a society and to realise that bad humans come in female form too.
Right.
And I think that's important. And in this one, it may not be Meghan. That might be a very unfair thing to say as her as a human. But it's important to note that bad humans do come in female form.
So we make an assumption that if a woman sheds a tear, she must be entirely innocent, and the man who has victimised her must be entirely guilty. And that's not always true, is it?
No, it's not always true, and we're going to have to see how this one plays out. I mean, at the moment, I would guess the country, although we're having an issue with the two of them, I think there's still a lot of love for Harry.
Yes,
and I think he is still broadly loved.
What?
And
He is. He does great jam.
Well, I will admit one thing. He's the most popular ginger. Maybe Chris Evans. Actually.
Ed Sheeran.
Oh, actually, but it's not a very high bar, is it?
Oh, I don't know. People love Ed Sheeran. No, but Harry, you must remember, he was the darling of the press when he was. And they would forgive him, even sort of appearing in parties with swastikas and things like that. He was just a naughty boy, pictures of him naked on whatever. And
stuff in Vegas.
It was. When in Vegas, it was set up in the press, doesn't it? The reality is that he went from hero to zero as a result of it. And the press can be quite fickle like that. I guarantee he's going to be back again.
My favourite ever story about Prince Harry was when, I forget which newspaper it was, said he was caught downing vodka after a polo match, and he went on a vodka binge, and I discovered he had 4 Smirnoff Ices. You know those little bottles? They're about 5% alcohol.
But I was just saying, just really quickly, apparently from this report, it actually says that one of the main problems that they have is that they any criticism is seen as a personal attack.
Yes.
And this seems to be like the root
This is the way to... I mean, we've got to move on now, but this is the way to disaster for politicians. We are watching a European war waged by a man who has meticulously removed every single advisor who won't tell him what he wants to hear, and the result is probably the most catastrophic performance by a major power in a military conflict in recent history. But anyway, Oli, I think, what did you say that Meghan was referred to by a terrified former member of staff?
Dictator in heels.
He's absolutely right. OK, so to Andrew.
Yes.
Difficult story, but let's go with it anyway. The BBC has asked Huw Edwards to give them back what? And you can't say their dignity.
Well, I can say trust, couldn't I? Because trust comes in on foot but leaves on horseback, and it's at an all-time low with the BBC as to how they've handled this. The reality is it was the 200 grand. And what happened, he was basically, he was one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid people. They give you a little bracket, it's about 475 grand. The period from when he was arrested to when he resigned is what we're talking about, and that was 200 grand. The difficulty is it's a contractual term.
Yes.
So the BBC, just to put it into perspective, and Barrister, we agree on it, we're not dueling all the time. They basically, it was that sort of side.
Andrew, I just want to pull you up on this.
Yes, please.
Because I saw the editor of The Sun, Victoria Newton,
yes.
and she said, I genuinely believe that the BBC should have illegally withheld the payments.
Okay.
Now, you know, she's not encouraging people to particularly break the law, but she said from a moral point of view, it would be impossible to take his pension, but actually they should have just stopped paying him and hung the consequences. Now, I appreciate you're a lawyer,
yes.
a barrister. What do you say to that?
I say it's a very interesting point of view. It's wrong, but it's a very interesting point of view. And there's a moral thing as opposed to a legal thing. And your contractual law obligation, put it the other way, if somebody is innocent and you stop their salary, all those however many once, I guess 6 months, then effectively it's wrong.
Yes.
So what you need to look at, and there are all sorts of clauses, it will depend on his own personal circumstances and what it says in there. Sometimes there's a morality clause. I do a lot of intellectual property. This is what I do, and I advise on these big celebrity contracts around Meghan Markle jam, and you work on that sort of basis. But what happens is you normally have that morality clause in there.
Which is if you bring this organisation into disrepute,
that sort of
and
thing.
then there's a definition of disrepute. Here's the thing I don't understand. So I initially thought that Huw Edwards had made a catastrophic mistake where he'd been sent these pictures amongst lots of other stuff and had failed to notify the police. Right. I was completely wrong. I mean, this person, what I don't understand about this Alec Williams, he proactively contacted celebrities as a paedophile. I mean, I'm not being funny, but if somebody contacts you going, hey, do you want to buy child pornography? Even if you wanted it, presumably you'd say no if you were Huw Edwards. I can't. And then he met him for a drink. Oli, I mean, this guy, he must have been, you know, was he on something? I mean, I just don't understand the sanity of any of this.
Well, you know, he tried to play the mental health card, but, you know, the judge was actually saying, oh, Huw Edwards previously had good character, and that's why he gave him the 6-month suspended sentence. But I'm sorry, if you do a crime like that, you know exactly what you're doing. Huw Edwards was an intelligent man, the highest paid BBC anchor. He knew what he was doing.
He's identified a paedophile. He's paid him for pictures.
He knew what he was doing.
Spent 4 years working with him. He's gone for a beer with him. You know, I mean, that is...
But just on that point, though, but talk about the sentence, because everybody in the press, they always say how lenient the sentence is. What there is, there's the sentencing council, which basically is like a tariff. It's supposed to be a scientific, so basically every judge should reach the same judgment. So if you look at the tariff under the sentencing guidelines, it's probably about right. You may disagree with those guidelines, but that's what the judge did.
Let me bring in the other barrister, Stephen, and just say to you, look, I mean, this isn't a legal programme, but there is always an element of public interest in all of these things. I mean, I would expect the people in this room to be held to a higher standard than members of the public. I think that's legitimate. More so, perhaps, for people like police and people in government. But still, I think it is legitimate to say, because of the position he's in and the damage he's done to the country, beyond what would be of a normal person, let's lock him up.
Yes, so there are a number of legal points. The first one is if the BBC have not got stuff in their contracts that allows them to act, then the BBC needs to improve their contracts. Yeah, I can help if we're all touting for
but to be fair, you charge like hundreds of pounds an hour, don't you?
I am reassuringly expensive. Now, the second legal point is again, because I'm a dad, I find this very hard. This is a very emotive topic. This is, you know, we must never, ever forget that the victims are those young boys.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't really want too much focus on...
By the way, many of whom may not have been rescued even now.
Even now. And there will be young children, and it's beyond imagining. What happened when he was sentenced is, Andrew's quite right, I think, from what I've read, I'm not a criminal barrister, but I've read a criminal barrister's opinion on this, and it looks as though it was right within the sentencing guidelines. But you're right too. It's not for us as barristers to go, the sentencing guidelines say that he shouldn't go to prison. You non-lawyer, you shush, you don't have an opinion. You obviously have an opinion. The public will obviously have an opinion on this. That is their political opinion, and it's not for us as barristers to say the sentencing guidelines are always right.
Are you effectively saying that the law should have probably looked at this in advance and said, is there a special level of damage done by public figures who engage in this?
The public will always have an interest in sentencing.
Yes.
They just will. And if you try and treat them like they don't, one, you're being a dictator, and two, it's not going to work in our society because our society is a democracy, but also it's quite a rigid democracy. The people won't let you.
The other thing is, Pete,
Yeah.
there's an element of this where people are going to sit back and go, I appreciate what he did to that guy in Wales was not a crime, but this guy's clearly a wrong-un.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, there are now multiple layers of this. There is the special harm he's done because he was a trusted person.
Yeah.
The damage he's done to BBC, less so a concern here
Yes.
with this audience, but some people will be bothered. But also the fact that he used his position to really, maybe abuse is the wrong word, but behave in a really pretty unacceptable way to a group of young people in a vulnerable state.
Yeah, and I do think as we move on in society that final one, that kind of abuse of power, that abuse of position, is really the one that catches everybody out. And I want to echo what Stephen just said there about the children and how they are the actual victims, because when you listen to the BBC's statement on this, they said that Huw Edwards had betrayed the BBC, and I was like, well, and then they would go on with this waffle about trust and standards and all this stuff that they rattle out every time we have one of these incidents. Not one mention of the victims.
Here's what they do. Here's what the BBC seem incapable of understanding, and it's something that was very clear to me when I worked in politics, and it's very clear now. This building and the BBC and ITV is full of young people who are absolutely desperate to get on. Yeah. They're highly motivated, they're highly intelligent, and in fact, actually, because they're so motivated, they have a different type of vulnerability to some person that you would meet in the streets who is perhaps of below average intelligence or whatever. Yeah. And you have to be incredibly careful to recognise that we, including you four, have a duty to make sure that vulnerability that they have is recognised and not exploited.
I couldn't agree more, and this is what I think the BBC have to hold their hands up and say they played a part in this, because it's no secret now, given some of the stories that have already come out, and those that are rumoured to come out pretty soon, that Huw Edwards was somewhat of a kind of nasty figure around the newsroom, that he had rather mean nicknames for people. He was, because he was the golden boy, he was the special one, you know, he was the top newsreader for the BBC. He was protected in a way. He was kind of untouchable, and that is fostered by the BBC itself and the type of environment they allowed to happen. And so this is the thing: the BBC can think they can wash their hands of this. I still think they have a lot of questions to answer as to how a person like this was able to do.
Those questions will come out, but you're absolutely right. We should focus on the victims because it's absolutely appalling. When I talk about the sentencing guide, that's what they do. But within that, they talk about abuse of position. And basically what happens, there's this guideline, and you have what's called aggravating circumstances, which means you get higher than the tariff, and that includes abuse of position, or mitigating circumstances if you haven't done it before.
My advice to anybody in the media is, if a sex offender gets in touch with you asking for money and offering pictures, just say no. Or just block them.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have thought that was fairly obvious. It didn't really require a piece of advice. Do you reckon the BBC have actually got that in their terms and conditions? Where they're going, watch out. For those of you considering meeting a child sex offender for a beer, just don't.
I can tell you, because I met somebody very senior in the BBC just last night, there is now a guideline going round about how you should behave. And they've overspelled everything, so you mustn't say any inappropriate things and so on and so forth. Some things which we would take for granted has now been spelt out in the BBC policy because they're trying to claw back that trust. And I think it's looking at that. But I'm with Stephen, I'm on all of that. I say, talk about the victims. So whilst the tariff might be there, don't just focus on the Sentencing Council. The judge was right. What we need to look at is the law and turn around and say, is this a proper deterrent to make sure this never happens again?
Absolutely. OK, so Andrew, it's back to you.
Yes.
What has the BBC asked for Huw Edwards to give back?
Trust, dignity, everything else, but also the 200 grand.
Do you know what? I think they're all good answers. I'll take them all. Yes, that's absolutely correct.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break.
Will they break the gender norm and they never will conform? Then I'm binary.
It's here Now that's what I call woke.
She's always a person with a cervix to me.
44 smash hits, now with more inclusive lyrics.
Man, I feel gender fluid.
Iconic tunes updated for the modern listener.
Love is to the left of me, vegans to the right. Here I am, stuck on the M1 with you. Things can only get greater. I want to know what a woman is. Here in my car, I am killing the earth with my toxic exhaust. It's a selfish way to live.
No trigger warning required.
Oh, the wokey cokey. Whoa, the wokey cokey. Oh, my little Europhile, my Europhile. When you gonna follow me back, Ramona?
Now that's what I call woke. Not streaming now. That was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
OK, to Steven Barrett. Keir Starmer has been accused of breaking the rules after a Labour donor spent £5,000 on what?
Well, it's going to be difficult to know what the 5,000 relates to, because I think it's about 76,000 in total. So, and I'm not terribly interested in material things. So
Well, it is related to material, but it's a different type of material.
It's material, because I thought it was the glasses, but I'm now going to take that as a hint that it's not the glasses. It's obviously some type of material.
So you think this question's unfairly worded because you think he spent 76 grand on all sorts of things he shouldn't, and we've unfairly picked out 5 grand.
What's going on is that he stood at the dispatch box. The Labour Party made an absolute song and dance. He had photos in the Peter Jones wardrobe, the wallpaper department, when they were ripping into Boris Johnson over this. And now they're trying to not apply rules consistently to themselves. That's an inconsistent application of rules, Andre.
They call.
Well, that's what it's called. The British people will not stand and will not tolerate an inconsistent application of rules. That's why we invented the rule of law.
Yes.
So that's what he's getting. And all of this teasing and jibing, I know we can all pretty much tell he's quite thin-skinned and hates it. But that's exactly what...
I worry. Can I tell you this? I worry increasingly. One of my co-hosts is Asher Gould, and he knows people who know Keir Starmer, right? And he is convinced, he's not convinced, he says that he believes there's a fair degree of evidence, though not conclusive, that Keir Starmer is just a very dishonest, very, very far left, Stalinist type person who has successfully kept his mouth shut successfully for years and has got...
Does he have a jam? Because I could promote that as well.
Look at that! I'll tell you what you can have. I'll give him it. Right, OK, but here we go. You can keep the mug. There's a little bit of ice in it, but nonetheless.
Do not promote Stalinist jam. Right?
Stalinist jam, what would it be made out of? Nothing, it would just be a jar.
Yeah, but I suppose it's the clothes for his wife that... there you go, that I'll give
Andrew, you listening?
I am. It's the Flocky Horror Show. This is what it was, even better. But what I loved about it, because you can get all the puns out of it, during the time of that wallpaper, and this is poor old Carrie doesn't live here anymore with Boris, it was all about interior resign.
Carrie doesn't live here anymore.
Exactly.
She's gone away to a town called yesterday.
But it is that hypocrisy, but it wasn't the gifts, and people slightly misrepresented it. It wasn't the gifts, it was the timing of reporting the gifts that were received.
Yes.
So it should have been done within, it was 28 days. It didn't happen within that period. So you're right, the question was...
Wait,
hang on a second.
Sorry, that's technically not correct. No. So basically, what has actually happened, according to the Labour Party, is that these were claimed.
Yes.
However, what they were claimed under is not correct. So they've actually asked for clarification. This is what the Labour Party have said. I don't know if anybody watched David Lamb.
But the Labour Party clamed that Keir Starmer had a curry with 35 people, forgot, and didn't know his deputy leader was there.
However, there was a very a hilarious interview that David Lammy gave on the BBC over the weekend. And I tell you now, he dropped Keir Starmer in it like I've never seen anybody drop anyone. He said, Keir Starmer accepted these dodgy donations. And that's what he called them.
How much
of a moron do you actually have to be?
The worst dropping it in it of anyone I've ever come across was that, I won't say who it was, that very nice lady who was accused of spying, who to me seemed, I don't know, not completely on the level. And Boris Johnson in Parliament described her as a spy. Well, that was helpful, Boris. Well done as Foreign Secretary.
That was amazing.
When he was standing up there to deny she was a spy, and he named her as one. Anyway, I want to ask you, Oli, do you think it's legitimate for politicians to claim money for clothes for their wives?
Well, David Lammy in his interview was trying to say that in America they have a significant budget for the First Lady, for the President, Vice President, Second Gentleman, and that's what he was trying to say as a way to justify it. But at the end of the day, these should have been declared, whether you're receiving something or not. And it comes at a time when they've just cut the pensioners' winter fuel allowance. So there's so much public anger, the fact that pensioners will not get this money.
There's going to be a lot of people. Now, look, to be honest with you, these tailored clothes that these people wear, I mean, you always see political party leaders, the stand of the clothing just goes through the roof. And it is it is an expense that's paid for, not by the taxpayer, by the political party. But £5,000 for clothes, a lot of older people, after that winter fuel payment thing, as you say, are going to think that is an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, I think a lot of old people are finding it insulting when they've, just lost this winter fuel and people could die. There are reports that 4,000 people could die from the cold.
And it's a report the Labour Party wrote.
Exactly. So it's basically almost laughing in their face. Then just as this scandal erupted, Keir Starmer's wife, Lady Starmer, was actually front row at a fashion show.
Yes.
A couple of days later.
I was there. I saw her.
Were you?
No, she's very good.
Getting a jam?
I was the jam. But also, to be fair, you want your world leaders here to look the part. They didn't spend taxpayers' money. It was a donation by Ali, I think it was, wasn't it, to be fair on that sort of basis, playing devil's advocate. So you've got to work on that sort of principle. But also, it's not the question, but you're right, the optics are wrong. In the time when you're taking away, and there are pensioners who are going to freeze this winter as a result of this scandalous abolition of the winter fuel.
We're going to leave it there because we're going to ask Steven Barrett, A, what were you going to say? And B, what is the answer to the question?
Well, I was going to get it wrong. I've now been given the answer by Pete, so I'm now going to get it right.
Don't worry. The last time somebody got a question wrong was January.
I've seen the phrase Lady Victoria Sponger, and I think it's going to stick.
Right.
And I think that this is clothes for his wife.
OK, clothes for his wife is absolutely right. OK, on to Pete. I mean, Pete's just giving everyone the answers. But anyway, Pete, a Lib Dem councillor. If this had been true or false, it would have been true.
True, yeah. I miss the old days of true and false. It was much easier.
A Lib Dem councillor has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after suffering from what? It's got to be an afternoon with Ed Davey.
I imagine he's just smelling all that hemp all the time and that natural deodorant that they all wear.
Do you know, I discovered something about the Liberal Democrats. Right, the Liberal Democrat youth and students, right? So I used to be a deputy chairman of the Young Conservatives, National Young Conservatives. Yeah. Anyway, the party was at a low ebb at the time. But anyway, we used to go off at these conferences. We booked somewhere like Lancaster University or whatever. The Liberal Democrat youth and students for their annual conference book a scout hut and all bring sleeping bags, right? I bet, can you imagine, Pete, 18-year-old Liberal Democrats in a scout hut? That would be, for those people involved, it'll be filth. Yeah. And for those people not involved, it'd be noisy. And for everyone, the vegan flatulence would be sickening.
God.
Right? I'll tell you what, if I arrive... No, actually, I'll tell you the worst story that ever happened to me. This is really bad, right? I went for a conference when I was vice chairman of the Young Conservatives in Dublin, and it was a very nice idea to get all the political parties of the UK and Ireland to get together. When we arrived at the conference, I was a little bit late, as I always am, and my friend phoned me up and he said, Andre, they've just announced that rooms are going to be shared between two political parties. I went, you don't have to tell me the rest of this story. I know exactly what's happened already. And he said, yeah, Labour with Fianna Fáil, yes. Lib Dems with Fine Gael, yes. And who is Sinn Féin with? The Conservatives. I said, we can't put the IRA with the Conservatives. They blew up our conference. And apparently Sinn Féin went, that should be a good crack. That won't be a good crack. We're checking into a local hotel.
No.
But anyway...
I do actually know the answer to this, and it's actually even more...
You can't possibly know that.
It's even more pathetic. She has got PTSD because of Brexit.
What?
Yeah, this is a Lib Dem councillor called Antonia Harris, I think.
Yes.
Harrison, I think.
That is also correct.
Is it? Thank you. And basically, she said that she was profoundly European, and leaving the European Union has had a significant impact on her mental health and well-being, and and she's just so delicate and just so fragile all the time. And I tell you now, if she thinks that this is ever going to help Britain rejoin the European Union, she's a categorical moron as well.
Well, she probably is anyway.
Yeah. But no, we see this all the time. I mean, we had it at the proms just the other weekend, with all the flags going. Like, nothing says more like down with the people, like waving the European Union flag at the proms. They just don't help themselves, these people. And I always said that the Brexit referendum was really about leaving the EU for about 15 minutes. The rest of it became a referendum on the people that actually liked the European Union.
Do you know what they do in Canada? Right. You can put the letters UEL after your name if you are a United Empire loyalist.
Oh, there you
which
go.
means that your family moved to Canada on the basis that they lost the American War of Independence. I think what we should do is we should have that for Tony Blair and the pro-Europeans.
Yeah.
What they can do is they can move to France and they can become EULs, EU loyalists.
Now, I'd like to do devil's advocate on this because actually and maybe I'm in a lucky position. I've never taken a position on Brexit publicly. I never will do. I was literally holding...
What is your position?
I was literally holding the baby. Literally holding the baby at the time.
Yes.
It just wasn't as big part of my life as it was of everybody else's.
Yes.
I was a single dad with a baby. You don't focus on other stuff.
Normally, Stephen, I don't mean to be rude. Normally, it takes for them to be a toddler before the wife leaves.
That's fine.
Let's just leave it.
Yeah, let's leave it there. But it was an event. It was a massive event,
yes.
And there was a psychosis to it.
Yes.
And there was a stress to it. There was a man who was on Twitter obsessively and then had a breakdown. Because a Remain supporting man. There was a Remain supporting Guardian journalist who had a heart attack.
Well, yeah, but I don't. But
the stress of it all. So
I'm going to move on. But I actually think that we have rewritten history. I think history is wrong in the history books because the Brexit referendum was really quite polite because most people were in the middle saying, well, some advantages to the EU, but it's also gone badly wrong and it's quite corrupt and overbearing. It was afterwards. It was afterwards when the Remainers attempt to overturn the decision that things got nasty and ugly. It wasn't the referendum itself, it was perfectly polite.
Well, this is why we have this constitutional concept of losers' consent. And the most important thing in a democracy is that the loser consents. We saw it in America when Trump didn't really consent. You must consent to losing. It's almost more important than winning. Because if you don't consent to losing, you will destroy your own country.
OK, that's what a pro-European wants to do anyway, right? So it was like when I was on with Hartley Brewer, she went, you can be patriotic and pro-European. I went, no, you can't. She went, yeah, that's true, actually. Anyway, so Peter, you have given the answer.
Yeah.
But the expert level, which gets you an extra point and might win the competition for you, is that you said that she had PTSD because of Brexit, but you also knew the name of the councillor. Which was what?
Antonia Harrison.
It was, in fact, Antonia Harrison. But the correct answer was that she claimed to have PTSD from Brexit. That's absolutely right.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break.
Introducing Mike and Kevin's Ice Cream for Snowflakes. Indulge in our deliciously sanctimonious flavors, such as Extinction Raspberryan, Cancel Culture and Cream, Cookie Double Warming, Non-Binary, Woca-Cola, Ginger Nut, and Vanilla. All made from our organic gender fluid. Mike and Kevin's Ice Cream for Snowflakes.
That was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
OK, on to Ollie. Ben & Jerry's. Oh, God, here we go. Right. Ben & Jerry's has launched an ice cream dedicated to Kamala Harris. Actually, you know what? When I read that quickly, I thought it said Kim Jong-un. Can you imagine? OK, we'll reread the question. Ben & Jerry's has launched an ice cream dedicated to Kamala Harris. What is it called?
Apparently, well, so Ben & Jerry's is a very woke liberal company.
Yeah.
They always attach themselves to liberal causes. We saw last year they said that Mount Rushmore, the famous statues of presidents, should be handed back to Native Americans because it was native land. And then, funnily enough, a native chief actually said to Ben & Jerry's, their headquarters in Vermont was actually based on native land. They should give it back. So they got called out for the hypocrisy. But now what they're doing, they had an ice cream truck. The founders, Ben & Jerry themselves, flew into Philadelphia to have this pop-up ice cream truck with this coconut-flavoured ice cream because Kamala Harris became an internet meme when she said, you know, something like, you just look like you fell out of a coconut tree.
Yes.
And that became a remix song on TikTok. And, you know, millennials have been using that.
But look, my understanding, and you know, my member of parliament was black and a conservative. A coconut was an insult.
Yes.
Well, we just saw that case in the UK, the court case with the woman at a pro-Palestine march had an image of a coconut with Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak, and she was taken to court for.
I mean, I wouldn't
crime.
take someone to court for that, but I see your point.
You know, it has racial connotations, but it stems.
And the racial connotation is that whilst you look black from the outside, you are actually white. And it's this idea that if you attempt to get on in the world as a black person, then you are selling out your own race in some way. So I find it a pretty despicable concept.
It is, just to clarify, but it wasn't meant as a racial slur.
Well, I can imagine.
It was meant as, basically, it's her normal word standard, and she talked about, and it was an often phrase, and it did go all over TikTok and other bits of pieces, saying, you've just fallen off a coconut tree. And that's the reference to it. I think they missed the trick, however, because they could have had KFC, it could have been Kamala, and actually spent an absolute fortune in 2016 getting everybody to pronounce her name rightly, and getting little kids and everything to say it's Kamala. Nobody gets it right in the media. It's still Kamala. But they could have had KFC, Kamala effing coconut or whatever, flaming coconut, or they could have had Kamala Sutra, which would have been a good one as well. But they have already done Caramel Sutra, so that's already gone.
Oh, my goodness.
What?
Right. So, here we go.
Go on then.
Right, shall we... I'll hold it like that.
Yes.
There we go. Look at that.
There you go, that's the one.
Kamala's coconut jubilee.
Told you.
If I'd have done that, I'd have lost my job and all my friends and my home and everything. People would have gone, that's the most racist. Right. Do you believe that's appropriate, Pete?
It's wildly inappropriate, but it's Ben & Jerry's and they think they're untouchable and they think they could get away with it.
Hang on, right. I used to...
Don't forget, racism only exists if you sit on the right. The left are never held accountable for any of this stuff, ever. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I very briefly worked for a major company in Leatherhead who I thought had bought Ben & Jerry's.
It's actually Unilever. It's owned by Unilever, but Ben & Jerry's still run their own company.
Oh, I see.
They're pushing their woke policies,
But the best thing, by the way, about Unilever headquarters is that there is free Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
Oh, is that right?
But I got told, I don't know if this is true, and I don't want to slag off Unilever because they're very nice people, but I got told that in America, you're limited to 1 pint per day of free ice cream.
Is that 1 pint?
No wonder they're all
1 pint an hour. That's a limitation.
That's insane.
1 pint per customer, per employee per day.
I'm going to say, but Ben & Jerry's have been ferociously anti-Trump since the very beginning, and I mean ferociously. Like, I'm not being funny. I'm not taking ethics lectures from an ice cream company, you know. And as Oli points out, that they got caught out for their own hypocrisy, and they barely covered that up with any level of competence.
But the reality is, because we are still programmed to believe that the political left are lovely and the political right are probably pretty nasty. We're programmed to believe that, therefore this must be right.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's been done by someone who's left wing. Can Trump win?
Absolutely. I mean, prior to recently, he was doing very well in the polls, and the polls are now trying to say that Kamala has an edge. But we know from 2016, you can't always trust the polls because they were saying Hillary had a massive chance of winning, and she, of course, lost, and they weren't expecting that. But, you know, I think the media is not being fair to Trump. I think a lot of the left-wing mainstream media are constantly attacking him. about his comments. And at the end of the
And
day...
this hatred in politics, by the way, is the reason why we're now on our second assassination attempt. The second, both of which I think are fairly credible, because these are sniper rifles with insight.
It's just been revealed by the New York Post. The shooter was actually positioned for 12 hours. And Trump had only decided to go golfing at the last minute. So how on earth did he know Trump was going to be at the...
So perhaps he went for multiple days and just nobody checked.
And he flew from Hawaii. Very strange.
It is interesting, however, that this whole campaign has been about ears, because you had Trump with the first one, and then you got all that rumour on the internet about Kamala during the debate, and she had these earrings that apparently you could hear. I don't even remember the rules that they said. You weren't allowed any props. Basically, they could turn around. You only spoke for 90 minutes. But all this thing, and I had Errol Musk, the father of Elon, on my show the other day, and he was telling me all about this wonderful theory about these earrings you can get, which looked exactly like the ones that Kamala was wearing, but they have a little antenna.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, those of you watching on the TV, I mean, that is quite hard to see in my ear, which is what the gallery communicates with me, just to tell me what timings we're on and whatever. I mean, and that's a pretty large version of it.
Yes.
You could get easily much smaller ones.
Exactly.
Anyway.
That's why you've got the phone, isn't it? You're telling me that's just a prop.
Yes. No. I've got to hang up first, then ring
Come on.
it.
So we're trying again. That's why you've got the phone. Oh, never mind.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
The phone definitely works. It's not plugged into anything. It definitely works. I like the phone. No deal. There we go. What is it? 15 stupid people and one question. Deal or no deal?
You mean the mams don't really call it?
Do you know, at my actual house, I've got a phone like that works. Hello? Yeah, it's a mobile phone. It's got a SIM card in the back.
But it is interesting. You talk about the current generation, and everybody does this when they're phoning. They don't do that anymore. Phones don't look like that, so they're a little flat and they wonder what you're doing. It's all like this.
I've got a friend who's got an 8-year-old son. He says that he just video chats his friends when he does bother chatting to them over the phone, and now he sort of goes, "Hello, Dad." No, it's completely. He doesn't know how to make a phone call. Anyway, okay, on to. We do want to ask you, Oli, what is the Ben and Jerry's celebration of Kamala Harris ice cream called?
It is Kamala's Coconut Jubilee.
So that's absolutely right. Okay, Andrew Eborn.
Yes.
Sadiq Khan says who should be given priority for social housing?
Well, I reckon he loves everybody. He's going to pedestrianise Oxford Street, I think, on that sort of basis. That's what he's talking about.
Yes.
The current thing in the news at the moment. Probably migrants is probably what they're going to say, because they need somewhere warm while the pensioners are freezing. So I'd be very interested to see what he actually says about that sort of stuff.
In fact, Andrew, pensioners is wrong. Now, does anybody else know, apart from Pete?
I was gonna say, when they had this prisoner release scheme, the early release after people served 40%, Sadiq Khan actually issued some comments that newly released prisoners should receive priority to receive social housing.
Do you know what? That really upsets me, and I'll tell you why. Because you look at Labour's policy on housing, I don't disagree with them that you need more housing, but I always like to simplify the mathematics. They've said that they want 40% social housing. Let's call it 50-50, because that just makes it so much easier for people to understand. What that means is, if I want to buy a house, that means I have to buy two, one for myself and one for the social housing person. Now, they've confirmed that terrorists will be allowed to keep their social housing. Sadiq Khan has talked about prisoners getting it. And also, we don't prioritise migrants, but because these large families come over, large families are a priority over single people.
That's what I said. I said migrants.
No, but it's not migrants.
It's not migrants. And I also said the other one. What was the other one?
Prisoners.
They're releasing them, aren't they? So they've got to go somewhere.
So you have to buy two houses. It just feels fundamentally unfair.
Well, it's unfair, when you've got hard-working people that work their whole lives to try and get a mortgage or to save, and then it's a slap in the face, and then suddenly, a prisoner's getting priority. We saw prisoners released the other day. One of them committed an offence the same day, assaulted a woman.
He basically just walked down the street and the first woman he spotted, or one of the first women he spotted, he sexually attacked.
And what did they expect? What did they expect releasing people? It's one thing if you've got somebody that's maybe committed a financial crime, gets an early release, they're not going to necessarily commit a violent crime. But when you're releasing violent offenders or domestic abusers as well, on the list, they're going to reoffend. You can't change these people, and that's putting people at risk.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is exactly what I predicted would happen. And do you know, a lot of people...
Pete, stop for a second. There are many reasons to call you a clever and switched-on guy, but predicting that letting prisoners out would lead to some of them committing crime. He's not a prediction.
Take a point away.
No. Pete's other prediction is that he believes the sun will rise in the east.
No, basically what I said was that there would be these violent offenders would be caught up within the lists created of these prisoners released. And I mean, it was an inevitability because the lists were put together by civil servants. So of course.
So just to explain that, Pete, whilst nobody was released who was in prison for being a domestic abuser, many of them were anyway.
Yes, exactly.
From their general
it happens to be like that. And you know, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, this is actually the fault of the Conservatives," and I think the Conservatives have a huge amount of blame to level at their feet. The fact they didn't build any prisons and they didn't have proper probation services and all the rest of it. However, these lists were created under the Home Office, under Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer and the Labour government. You know, at some point they have to hold their hands up and say, we got this wrong, you know, and we got about this individual and all the rest of it. You know, they do have to start actually saying, we got this wrong, I'm not the Tories.
I worry that some of the policies they're enacting are deliberately to make the Conservatives sound bad, even at the detriment of people of the country. Read the winter fuel payment doesn't save any money. OK, Andrew. All right, Andrew, come on. Sadiq Khan said who should be given priority with social housing.
Well, you mentioned two groups, which I mentioned, and you're right. It was.
Oh, you're saying it's both.
No, I'm saying it's both.
No,
and you mentioned that. You mentioned the thing. It's both of those. And actually,
very competitive.
No, it's of course fiercely competitive. It's got to be. But I'm also right, and so it makes it easy. So it is both migrants and it's also.
On this occasion, it was prisoners, but it was also migrants in the past. So I accept that answer.
Thank you.
OK.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. That was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
Stephen Barrett. By the way, we've got 5 minutes left, so we're going to go through quite quickly. So, Stephen Barrett, Keir Starmer has banned what on TV before 9 p.m. to save the NHS?
Banning adverts seems to me to fall under the purview of the regulator.
Yes.
So I think it's actually outside the Prime Minister's hands. Is it actually going to happen? Very interesting question.
Well, OK, I have to say to you, before we are going to move on, I'm going to go to you next, Pete. I have to say to you one thing. If you were to be a conspiracy theorist about Keir Starmer, let's be clear, I've not got the financials in front of me, but ITV is reliant on Coronation Street, X Factor, the Britain's Got Talent, Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway, basically those 4 shows in whatever iteration. They are all sponsored by junk food companies, quote unquote. If they lose their revenue, ITV could go bust, leaving who? The BBC.
Hurrah!
And it is this nonsense idea that banning things works. Because we had a sugar tax, and I'm glad that we're now all svelte and really healthy. I mean, that worked wonderfully, didn't it? I mean, we've all...
It cost 20p extra for cola at Nando's, but I just have it anyway. Right, so anyway, but you're saying that it's junk food ads?
Junk food,
That's absolutely right. OK, Pete, the former Fox News host, Daryl Cooper, has been criticised after he said who is the chief villain of the Second World War.
Oh, well, this was utterly ridiculous. He said it was Winston Churchill.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Absolutely crazy. And
worse than Hitler.
Worse than Hitler. This is just the perverse mind of the kind of progressive left on full display. And it's one of the reasons.
Look, I don't know anything about Daryl Cooper, but is he a racist anti-Semite, or is he somebody who is just so hell-bent on destroying Western power that he'll say anything?
It seems to be more of the latter there, that, you know, he's progressive, he's a progressive historian, and, there needs to be...
So he's a historian?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, if I remember rightly. He was interviewing a historian. I can't quite remember the story. It was on Tucker Carlson, where it's all gone down. And obviously anything on Tucker Carlson, the left have gone mental about.
I mean, I'll tell you what upsets me, right? So Winston Churchill made some off-colour remarks. But even the case of the Bengal famine, the point that people forget is Japan was blockading the country, right? we couldn't feed ourselves. The idea that you were going to take food that Britain didn't have and then send it all the way to Bangladesh, going through 2 blockades, one, the German one, which had sunk half our shipping anyway, and then it was never going to happen.
No, it wasn't. And this is the thing. That's the nuance of history. And, nuance should be, the history should be without politics, and it should just be discussed in that nuanced way. What people like this particular individual want to do is just focus on a single aspect, view history through a single prism.
What he was trying to do was clickbait. If you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. So you're going to talk about our greatest world.
All right, I can't stand you.
Thank you. Buy the jam.
Buy the jam.
The reality is exactly that. So he wants to get a name for himself. If he'd said Adolf Hitler, people would say, oh, yeah, so what? Say Winston Churchill, Maggie Thatcher, all of those sort of things you're going to start.
So Ollie, who do you think was worse, Hitler or Churchill? For a bonus point.
Yes, a bonus point.
I mean, also, the other thing is, if you were going to complain about some of the racist comments of leaders in the Second World War, even the second, third, fourth and fifth place would be taken by Nazis. In fact, I reckon if you were to place who was the more racist, anyone from the German nation versus Churchill, I think he'd struggle to make it into the top half, if I'm being totally honest. Because let's be clear, in Nazi Germany, there were a few fairly racist people.
Yes.
Millions of them. And, it's disrespectful to Winston Churchill, who actually won the war for the West, and if it wasn't for him, things could have been a lot different. And this historian, I think, like you were saying, just wanted clickbait, and he also tried to downplay the Holocaust.
Yes, he did.
Made some horrific comments that were very upsetting for the Jewish community and some...
OK, well, in that case, let's do this for a bonus point. Pete, you can do both. Who is the biggest wrong-un on the Fox News channel?
Is it Darryl Cooper? Is that his name?
Correct. OK. Secondly, who did he say the chief villain of the Second World War is?
Incorrectly, he said it was Winston Churchill.
Is also correct. OK, on to Ollie. Well done. That is a bonus point. I've had 2 bonus points.
Thank you.
I think you might be on for victory here. Ollie, who banned Jordan Peterson from her radio show this week?
Well, it was Carol Vorderman. So basically, somebody called in a show discussing how the family court system, in their opinion, was biased against the men.
Yeah.
Discussing that.
Well, and that is undoubtedly true.
Exactly. And, they were discussing their opinions on the matter.
Oh, by the way, I should say, so I don't offend the barristers, the law is unfair to men. The family courts just implement what the law says.
And this caller was explaining that from his personal experience, and then Carol Vorderman tried to cut him off and say, no, it's not, I'm a woman, I know better and stuff like that. And then he mentioned a quote from Jordan Peterson, who many people respect, some people find him controversial, and she literally just started cutting him off. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to have you quoting this man on my show.
The thing is with Carol Vorderman, by the way, I love the fact that Jordan Peterson wasn't even there.
Yes.
She went, I know what I'll do. I'll ban him. That'll get me on the telly. The problem is with Vorderman, right? I never know it's her. Right, because since Countdown,
there have been a number of positions, haven't there?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's had about 5 different faces, hasn't she? The latest one, I mean, she looks good. I'm not going to have a go.
Sensational.
But she does not. I mean, she's just got a different face.
Yeah, it's hard to recognise her sometimes, talking from experience. But basically...
Well, you've had no work done.
None at all. But, the problem with Carol Vorderman, she's one of these progressive liberals that she doesn't like debate. She's blocked half of the country on Twitter.
Oh, does she block me, do you reckon? Keep talking.
I bet she has. She's blocked me. I've never interacted with her. Everybody seems to be blocked by her.
I've got a jam.
She just doesn't. She just doesn't like other opinions, and that's wrong. If you're hosting a show, on the Liberal BC network, you should be having a debate. You should allow your callers to speak.
Yeah.
And, if you disagree with them, okay. But to say that you can't quote a certain psychologist on my show, that's just shutting down debate.
The crazy thing as well is the hypocrisy.
Oh, it's quite interesting. Her tweets are protected.
Yes, they are protected. You have to be recognised by that.
So should I follow her and see what happens?
Yes, follow her.
Instant block, Andre.
You might get an instant block. But interestingly, Andre, while you're doing that, in November 2023, she went out and said, I will not be silenced by the BBC, and she resigned from her position for a local radio station. So there's the hypocrisy of that.
Yes.
We talked about hypocrisy beforehand, about Keir Starmer and the Boris Johnson and that sort of stuff about receiving stuff. Well, it's the same hypocrisy with Carol. And as lovely as she is, she should have let people talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ollie, who banned Jordan Peterson from her radio show?
Carol Vorderman.
Beautiful and correct. Okay, the final question is to Andrew Eborn.
Go on.
Come on.
Come on.
Keir Starmer has announced that Reform UK is to be classified as a proscribed terrorist organisation.
True.
Like ISIS. Is that true or false?
Well, it is false, but it wouldn't surprise me. And interesting, what happened is Reform got, 14.2% of the vote, ended up with 5 seats. The Liberal Democrats got 12% of the votes and ended up with 72. There is something wrong with that system.
By the way, no, they didn't get 5 seats, apparently.
They did get 5
No,
seats.
they didn't.
They did. They got
they
5.
didn't.
Well, let's not get into the 5-seat underpants debate, right, which has been frothing around. Which always the underpants debate always pulls up controversy. Anyway, let's think about who won. Do you know what? I was going to give the prize to Pete Barnes. However, having been reminded of the underpants incident, the winner well, let's just do this then. Pete got 5 points. Steven Barrett got 17 points. Andrew Eborn got 358. But Oli London smashes it home with 6.35 million points. Congratulations. Oli London is the winner. Until next time,
Well done.
goodbye.